The first thing that comes to mind for most people is probably Jumanji or Sathura. For good reasons, they're pretty good movies. And if you were anything like me, you probably had an argument with someone trying to prove that Sathura is better than Jumanji. Truly my Edward versus Jacob moment. One of the main tropes used in this genre is the board game taking a life of its own and challenging the relationships of the people playing the game. This genre is a guilty pleasure of mine, and I found a couple more movies worth exploring that fit this description. So join me as we explore the world of board game movies. When it comes to this list, I mainly focused on movies that made a fully fleshed out prop of a board game. I'm not going to review Jumanji or Sathura in this video. I think we can all agree that these two movies are at the top of the list anyways. Here's a list of the movies I am going to talk about. I am going to include a link to these in the description. Let's get started. So first we have Gatlopp. Hell of a game. This movie introduces us to four friends that have a get-together after 10 years of not seeing each other. One of them gets a hold of a weird drinking game called Gatlopp inside of a vintage piece of furniture. After talking about life and feeling down on themselves, they decide to start playing the game. And they soon realize that this game has supernatural powers, and if they don't finish the game before sunrise, they will disappear into hell. So a lot of reviews praise this to be a lower budget Jumanji with more adult themes in mind. And I agree with that. They don't rely on gore to make you uneasy. In fact, they lean into the blood special effects in a more Ace Ventura kind of way. And even though you can throw this movie in the same category as a truth or dare kind of genre, I think the prop team did such a great job with the board game design that it kind of feels unfair to label this film in the same realm as those movies. A lot of people did expect more horror turned comedy moments in this movie, and I agree with that sentiment, but there is not a lot of room for that without cutting into the emotional resonance of the overarching story that the director and the writer wanted to leave us with. Like, if they just started bantering with random monsters and the spirit of this board game itself, Ash vs. Evil Dead style, I think that would have made this film worse. I think this film was very enjoyable to watch, and if you're looking for another whimsical board game movie, I think this one is great. I'm giving this movie an 8 out of 10. The next movie is Murder, Bury, Win. So the film starts with three friends that made a board game and are trying to bring it to market using this website called Game Changer, which is the film's version of Kickstarter. After they fail, they get lucky with a man who wants to buy their idea. The man, though, wants to take full credit for publishing their board game. After he helps them play test the game and provides some ways to make the game better, they have a heated argument that ends up in disaster. The man is then accidentally pushed into a bear trap, leaving these three friends on the hook for manslaughter. After they realize that their search histories are going to make this whole situation look premeditated, which would put them all in prison, they decide they have to cover their asses. And because the theme of their board game is how to get away with murder, they start to draw inspiration from their game and how they can get rid of this dead body. The movie has a lot of contemporary commentary on the current landscape of launching a game on Kickstarter and the frustrations that many game designers go through. I will say that even if this didn't have the budget to make an over-the-top gore scene, they were pretty good at pacing and tension throughout the whole movie. This movie was also an unexpected gem. A lot of the writing elements that get introduced played really well with each other, and every motivation and plot twist doesn't just feel like it was just there to move the story forward. So if you're into game design and want a movie that will keep you on your toes, this is a pretty good one. Overall, I think this movie deserves a 7.5 out of 10. The next movie is Waters of Echo's Pond. In this movie, we get introduced to 9 friends having a getaway trip. They stay the night in an old house that was built on a private island that now belongs to an uncle from the friend group. After, and you might have heard this before, the lights go out, someone goes downstairs to try to fix the lights and ends up finding the old board game. And since they have literally nothing else to do, they decide to play the game. The game starts turning them into demons fueled by their hatred, jealousy, or resentment for each other. And they must find a way to survive the night. This one started very cheesy. It did get interesting faster during the prologue than the other movies. And let me tell you, if you're prone to secondhand embarrassment and cringe, this movie will have you covering your face. Where this movie lacks is giving any real motivation for the group to play the game or a way out after they realize that they are getting possessed by the game. I think they tried to set up lore for Pan to make him the creator of Pandora's box. I'm making this connection since they are both from the Greek mythos. But they kind of don't elaborate at all on this. They kind of just scrapped it after they showed Pan for a scene or two. Overall, if you like slasher films, you might enjoy this one. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. This next film is Open Graves. It's set in northern Spain, following a group of surfer friends studying abroad. They get a hold of an old board game called Mamba through a voodoo shop owner as a gift for his bad behavior. He claimed that it is vintage and made during the Spanish Inquisition. They go out to eat and make fun of the rules, as the board game describes that it will grant a wish to the winner at the end of the game. Meanwhile, we have a detective investigating a string of bizarre deaths that have been going on in the surrounding area. After a blackout and some back and forward, the group decides to play the game to pass the time. And after doing so, they start dying in the same order that they lost the game in. So we follow them as they try to find a way to prevent this. This movie is very unapologetically early 2000s. It was filmed very traditionally in the horror sense, although they did overuse their Dutch angles a bit. A lot of the scenes were very gore focused, and I'm sorry, but this movie went from low-key Final Destination to whatever the fuck this is. We have a snake doing acrobatics out of nowhere. And I gotta say, the practical effects for being burned alive look pretty good. I do think they did a disservice to the film by using a lot of CGI at the end. The ending was also underwhelming. I thought they were going to throw in one last plot twist, but they kind of left it pretty open-ended. And if you're a fan of early 2000s horror, you might enjoy this one. I gotta give it a 5 out of 10. So, the next movie, The Game of Death. This movie introduces us to 7 millennials that find an old board game by chance at a lake house. This board game steals a little bit of their blood and curses them all to kill someone else before the timer runs out. And if they don't do that, they will die instead. And for the game to end, we need 24 people to give up their life. And I'm not gonna lie, I was not prepared for the 12 minutes of straight horny at the start of the movie. It has a pretty cool intro though. We have a lot of pixel art and low poly cinematics, something you barely see at the start of movies. And I think this film shines in terms of visual effects for gore. It felt on par with some Blumhouse effects. They had this set piece of someone who got split in half by a car that looked insane. But I have to say, this movie is very plot forward. I was expecting a twist, an omitted rule, some backstory from the neighbors like the old man at the start of the film. I didn't like that most of the kills also happened so quickly just to skip to the final showdown in the third act. The board game was also very open-ended and lacked a lot of rules that other board game movies have. So that kind of made the cycle in the group run the show, which felt like the easiest way out for the writers. So if the board game would have given them actual turns, I think the stakes could have been set up far better for them to try to find a way to justify their actions. Like maybe every time they had to take a turn, they were forced to rationalize who the best person to kill would be. Overall, this movie had a great concept, but The Circle had a better take on providing social commentary over who gets to live and die based on their backstory. So this movie gets a 4 out of 10 from me. This next film is called Beyond the Gates. In this movie, we have 2 brothers that reunite after their father disappears. They start snooping around the assets of a video store their father owned, and they find an old VCR board game called Beyond the Gates. They put on the game for old time's sake since they used to play games like these when they were kids. And they find out that it somehow captured their dad, and they must find 4 keys hidden by the game to free him. I really wanted to like this movie. I actually had high hopes for the VHS board game concept, but this ended up being The Ring with extra steps. And I gotta say, this one starts the slowest out of all of them, and it dragged for a long time. It was also one of the cheesiest, and even though it was made in 2016, it lacked proper fundamental stylized camera work. One nice thing to say about this movie would be the practical effects they used to blow someone's head off on screen. I thought that was well executed. Anyways, if you like movies with an 80s vibe, you might enjoy this one. But this is a 3 out of 10 from me. Alright, and that's the list. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.